All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special guest. We have the one and only, the hip hop podcasting shinobi, Mr. Kambi Thandi.
That's the
Welcome.
first time I've ever been called that.
Yeah, well, I know that you like introducing your guests well on the podcast of Create 808, and I wanted to do the same thing in a similar fashion.
And you delivered, my friends. You
Thanks,
delivered.
man.
So
How you doing? You well?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I am in a creative space at the moment where I usually don't get to actually like brainstorm and really like get more creative rather than the nitty gritty of editing. I've took a bit of a window out of time just to feed that creative monster and not just be constantly editing and publishing in socials all the time, that cycle you can get in. So yeah.
Absolutely. Managing to carve some time out, day to day, family, very difficult, but very important.
Essential.
So
Absolutely.
you are executive producer on the Create 808 podcast, which I've been listening to for a very long time. You've had some incredible guests on there, like Black Thought, from the Roots, and people like that. The CEO, Steve Rifkind. Where did the love of hip hop? I mean, you focus especially on the '90s, nostalgic '90s hip hop era. Where did that love from hip hop first start with you?
First started, I think the first time I realised I would actively participate in a culture was Crisscross, mate. And I'm not sure if you remember Crisscross's tape, but it was so beguiling to a young man who's had quite restricted access to music. We all had Michael Jackson albums. Everything else fed to us was probably Punjabi music, Bhangra music, Hindi music, which you end up rebelling against, I suppose, when you get older, if that's all you're given. So Top of the Pops, obviously, on every Friday. That was a nice avenue into like the wider world. And then Criss Cross was one of the things that I remember seeing the cover and thinking, oh, wow, like you can do that, right? You can just wear your jeans backwards. And doing that around the house and being like, yeah, I'm part of something. And I'm in like a little village with no one caring. Mum's just like shaking her head. My sister doesn't know what's going on. It's just me in my world thinking, yeah, I think I like this. I like this just culture, So yeah. And then it got a lot deeper after that. So yeah. But that was an access point. So people are naysayers on Criss Cross, but they got me into hip hop. So there you go.
I know. I mean, I think there's something about shocking your mum when first listening to hip hop that really kind of flips the switch for a lot of people. I remember when I first started getting into hip hop, I had a cousin who lived out in Los Angeles, and I wasn't super into music just in general. And when I first went out there to visit, we hadn't seen them in a long time, and we got somebody to buy us the Carter 3 by Lil Wayne,
right?
And we stood outside, and when we got back, I took it. We got in the rental car, gave it to my mum, and we're like, "Oh, can you put this on?" And she goes, "It doesn't have any swear words on it, does it?" I went, big explicit content sign on the bottom, and literally she picks a track at random, and it was obviously Lil Wayne going, "Sucker," and my mum just turned around and went, "Alexander!" And from that moment on, I just knew hip hop was the thing for me, the rebellious kind of act. I mean, hip hop has clearly played a large role in your life, as it has for so many people across the world. What do you think its qualities are that allow people to fall in love with it so deeply?
It's interesting because I think everyone has such vast different experiences with this. And it is a culture, right? Like, I know it's very much easy to cliche it and say it's a lifestyle, but it genuinely is. It genuinely, that's how it came about. It's something you do, it's something you participate in. And I think a few different things we've kind of touched on there as well. But I think one of the big things was that you didn't need anything to be part of it, as in you needed a pen and a pad. And if you didn't need a pen and a pad, you could just, it's cheap. It's cheap, man. Like, you don't need a guitar, don't need a trumpet, don't need a cello, don't need piano lessons. And I think that's one definite big element that if it hit me, but for people who are better than me, like, rapping and stuff, for those people, it must have been amazing just to know, oh, I can just write this down and just spit it and that's it. But I think what we touched on there about like rebelling against parents.
Yeah.
I think rebellion is very much at the heart of hip hop. It came through, you know, such awful circumstances as a sign of expression, and then rebellion kind of hand in hand. But I also think it's not right really, but as society, I do think that we look at things that are a little bit more outside of our realm of security, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
As in, not a lot of people who bought the NWA albums lived NWA's life.
Yeah.
But just like you can say, not a lot of people who love The Godfather or Casino or these, you know, Goodfellas, we don't know gangsters. But there's something so alluring about the human condition in those circumstances when they're expressed through film or book or music, as in hip hop. I think it's something about us humans that are kind of drawn to rebellious, dangerous, like society, parts of society, right? So dangerous individuals, I can see us like, you know, kind of, oh, you know, you want to know what that world is about. And I think that was big, because I remember two of the moments in my hip hop growing up, you know, were Ice-T's intro, which was like, if you hate the words, you know, bitch, shit, fuck, motherfucker. If you hate those words, then go suck a roar. I remember as a young kid, like I think it was about like 10 years old then or something, or probably a bit older, but it was like, I'd never heard anything so disgracefully rude.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it was Doggy Style. And Doggy Style was an album that I got into, just sonics. I'd never seen anything, nothing had made me change the way I walk down a street until I'd heard that G-Funk. And I'd missed a G thing, I had been there, but I hadn't got the Chronic. And it was that. And I remember listening to it over and over and over again, to the point that my cousin was just like, you only like this because of the swearing, Cam. There's no way. Yeah. And there's all these, I mean, I was like, that's outrageous. I love the, you know, the world and everything. So I think, I don't know if I really answered your question very well there, but I think there's the fact that you can take part, the fact that it's dangerous, which isn't always correct, because it's a world that, you know, for all the privileges me and you might have had in our life, there's a lot of people that haven't got them, and yet we kind of participate. And when I grew up and went to somewhere like London, that was absolutely amplified and extended. Not once was I made to feel not welcome at a hip hop show. Not what I don't remember that ever. And I remember that being quite inclusive to me. But then again, women, you know, and I didn't, you know, homosexuals, that kind of thing was so out of the realm of, oh, you know, it wasn't even on my radar. It's like, oh, that we should be more inclusive, because I was so young. And then as you get older, you realize, oh my God, yeah, well, that was set in stone so long ago. So it's a little bit of that. It's inclusive, but you know what? Slowly, as the culture grows, you're getting little Nas X's, you're getting people like that. A Tyler, as we were talking about Tyler off camera, like they're doing stuff where I'm like, yeah, absolutely, mate. Just go for it and make this culture even richer. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Tyler. I mean, there was a track that was released in, I think it was '96, and it's Dr. Octagon, Blue Flowers. And I was listening to that a couple of days ago, and that reminded me of Tyler, kind of like the audio nightmare kind of sounds that he kind of brought into his earlier stuff.
Yes.
But I think there really is kind of, I couldn't have put it better than you put it, in terms of how hip hop has made us feel. I mean, good music kind of makes you feel understood in a sense, you know, for a lot of kids that maybe don't have the group of friends that they click with, you know, and that's kind of something that we kind of miss out on. And, you know, these albums that we grew up with, is there an album that really stood out to you growing up?
I think Doggy Style was probably the one where my whole axis changed on that. I think Doggy Style was the one. And I remember thinking at that point, okay, nothing can match this that I listened to. But then Nevermind was, and when I look back at it, I may have been like Doggy Style's the number one, and then going back and get the Chronic, then Illmatic.
Yeah.
36 Chambers was huge for me. Like 36 Chambers was, you know, when Doggy Style, even though where I was, no one listened to Snoop, but it felt like the world knew who Snoop was.
Absolutely.
When I heard 36 Chambers and saw the video to Protect Your Neck and stuff, I was like, oh my Lord, no one knows about these. And they have, some of them got masks on. You don't even know what they look like. Ghostface with his mask. And I remember Nevermind and Prodigy, Music for a Jilted Generation. Those two are the only other non-hip hop albums that, as I've grown older, I love punk music and I love electronic music, be it dubstep, hardcore. It's weird that my love came from two albums, pretty much, whereas hip hop came from a huge dearth of albums. And Rage Against the Machine, I suppose, was another one. But really, it was Nevermind, and really it was Music for a Jilted Generation. Those two made me feel like, it's not, I'm not restricted to just hip hop, but hip hop was my one thing I just dug and dug and dug, because there's just a huge history to it. So I'll probably go Doggy Style, man. What about you?
Hip hop wise, I'd say I'd move into the trip hop category and go with Science Fiction by Uncle.
Okay. Interesting.
Actually, I actually got put onto it not too long ago, and I watched that documentary, the one about James Lavelle. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it. No, I haven't seen
it.
Really,
really excellent. Definitely worth a watch. And it was more about James Lavelle, obviously, for people who don't know. You know, he had the Mowax label and signed people like DJ Shadow. And it was a mixture of DJ Shadow's kind of excellence, you know, coming into his own, but also James Lavelle's curation. I mean, it's not just the music, man, it's the artwork, it's, you know, the story that you get led through. And even though I only heard it more recently, I think it's definitely something that I've learned to really appreciate. And as you said, the more I've grown up, the beautiful thing about music is you start in one place, you see connections, and you know, it's just a rabbit hole, isn't it? You know, I'm following rabbit holes, I'm digging my own, I'm creating, you know, and that's what I find so exciting. But one thing that I feel over the past couple of years that has happened is, and you might agree or disagree, is that the art of actually creating or making an album is being lost, in the sense, because, you know, with things like Spotify and everything, you can skip tracks, and, you know, do you believe that artists are still going through the whole curation to the extent that maybe James Lavelle did on Uncle, or not?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's such a deep, you could really go in and really drill into that and make it generational, make it about, you know, the terms of monoculture, which we don't really have now. Game of Thrones maybe is the last time there was a monoculture, and even I know there are people who don't care about Game of Thrones. I
still have friends to this day who have not watched an episode, and I have not spoken to them until they do.
and within your rights, mate, I think that's absolutely right. But think about it, if Game of Thrones had come out in 92, 93, every single person would be talking about that one thing. When it comes to curation of albums, that's a bit like, technically, like, are people concentrating on an album as a body of work? It's a bit of a separate question. I was thinking, like, if you were to look at, like, what makes things resonate in popular culture, because, you know, of mastery of curation and really, like, producing an album, then I think it's just a different world now. Like, I think people still have that. I think, like, people can still make masterpieces, it be in album form. Okay, yes, it's about 15 years ago, but Burial is another one that I love, and I'm thinking just musically generally, absolute masterpiece with Untrue. And then Fortet has gone on to do what I would call at least one masterpiece in his life. And these other people that outside of hip hop definitely still have that. I would say punk rock has modern masterpieces, I would say. And then it's like Titus Andronicus, shout out, The Monitor is a masterpiece. They've thought about that album, and it's about 10 years old now. But even, like, I think each generation has their own masterpieces, has their own idea of oh, that's what means something to me. So XXX I don't know much of his music, but who is it that's going to classify that as a classic? It's going to be the kids who get older and write
Absolutely.
and do pods and do vlogs. They're the people who then cement that and brand it that, just like we were brought up with John Peel or brought up with the BBC, brought up with The Source, Hip Hop Connection. They were the people giving it a stamp that made it that, right? So when it comes to curation of an album, and do people really attack something like that? If you were to name your top, the biggest artist right now, Drake, okay, I don't know how big Travis Scott is, but Travis Scott's pretty huge.
Massive. Yeah.
And Kendrick and J. Cole, right? So if you just look at their careers, Kendrick definitely does that. Kendrick does that almost every project.
Yeah.
J. Cole tries to do that. It doesn't always land. But I think he attempts to make something as a piece.
Yeah.
KOD being one of the recent ones where I was like, at least he's coherently gone in and tried to make it, like, curate it as
it's a cohesive body of work. Yeah.
Yeah, like a body of work. That's it. Drake, I think Drake may have attempted that back in the day. I think he probably succeeded with one or two, but I think for him, it's just the formula. And that's the marriage, right? Like, the formula keeps winning. Why would you stop? Yeah. Especially if you think you've done your artistic creativity and you think, like, now I'm ready to just enjoy myself and just enjoy life. Or, you know, Drake's never really got that serious, but, you know, he's got lambasted for that as well. So I don't think it is lost. I think it's definitely not coherent with, it's not conducive to being successful anymore. So the Roots make an album and they really think about their albums, Roots do, and bang, goes gold. Maybe goes platinum after a decade, right? They knew that was the case probably, and just went and did it. Nowadays, it's the same thing. Like, you know, if you make an album, it's not going to sell unless you make 10 of them are singles.
Of course.
That's what's going to get you over the top to actually earn money, unless you're people at Arm & Hammer who then think, no, we're just going to do what we want to do. Haram to me is, I don't know, I won't call it a masterpiece, but it's definitely such a body of art. I don't know if you've heard of Haram with Alchemist and Arm & Hammer. That came out this year. That's this year. Those guys are making what I perceive as art. And big up Sean Sotero. Sean Sotero did actually do a piece in the Complex where it's like the rise of art rap. So I don't know if that's now getting branded as art rap, but I think these people at Alchemist are striving to make perfect music. Yet he drops 6 albums a year, and one maybe. Rock Marciano is another one. Carr is another rapper where I would say he's got 2 proper masterpieces in his canon, and it's just because they don't sell, or the critic, we haven't got that, you know, the overlord going, that's a classic. Rolling Stone is not relevant anymore. Like, no one, I don't care for Rolling Stone. I don't know many people who do, but there isn't that overarching Pitchfork gets lambasted. You know, there's no one to say it is unless you're in it. And like yourself, you become an actual person with a voice in the industry, or a voice that people listen to. And then, yeah, Anthony Fantano gives it a 10. It's probably a masterpiece to a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I still think the people who really struggle, like Burial, you know, he created that. He wasn't really famous, you know. Nobody really knows exactly who he is, and, you know, people have speculated, but you know, that was a piece of work that was born out of struggle. And it comes back to that thing that great art is born out of struggle. You know, science fiction was kind of arguably the best thing that ever came out from, you know, that kind of section of people, in terms of James Lavelle. And, you know, it was the first thing they ever made, you know. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's, you know, as you said, art rap. You know, there's also things like abstract rap now and stuff like that. And there's definitely pockets of space for things to be made. But, you know, as you said, there's the kind of Godfather, you know, playing with a marionette, kind of saying, right, well, if you don't have 10 singles in this album, you're not going to be or make money. And the question is, what's more important to you, the art or making a living? And, you know, it depends on a person's situation, in my opinion. You know, I mean, here at Pod Bible, we are talking about about podcasting for podcasters. So I just have a couple questions about your podcast, man. As we mentioned earlier, you've interviewed people like Black Thought, Steve Rifkin. You know, how do you go about researching the interviews and, you know, curating for the interview? Do you have kind of a set process that you go through, or does it switch up with each person?
It's become quite set now. I have to say, it was very fluid at the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe because I didn't have a child then, so maybe I had the hours to really put into that. But as life has gone on, and as you know, I see myself as a relative novice to interviewing, because even though I have a history in radio, I have a history in podcasts, I have presented documentaries on like Asian Network One Extra. I have done that, but it was never, producing was always my thing, and keeping an eye on how does this sound all in, you know, like, is this sounding right? Have we tackled this subject? Trying to, and so when I first started, it was like very like that. And then I realized, no, this is a craft, and people work. It's like Questlove said, man, 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours. And it's like, I'm nowhere near that, I don't think, at the moment, but if you can see yourself getting better, I think that's always a big thing. So to begin with, it would be, I mean, the internet's a wonderful thing. Obviously, you dive into that, listening. I think one of the big things I would say that we've done well with, which I didn't really understand until later, and then realised that we've actually got a bit of a fan base that really resonates with that, was I tend to only really ask the questions I care about or give a shit about.
Absolutely.
I think I hear so many interviews, and this is not, but they're just like trying to cover bases, if you know what I mean, and like trying to get to the point where, you know, there's a great story here that this, you know, this person's told 100 times. If I found that story still interesting, and I think I can still bring something different to it, I'll still ask that question, even though I've heard Q-Tip talk about this. Well, I haven't had Q-Tip, but if Q-Tip was on and he'd tell the story 3 or 4 times, I'd probably still want to hear it. But there are moments where I think, if I listen to their music, take myself back to why I love this person, and then try to what is that in the music? Like, what songs are there that really get me like that? Or what lyrics are there? And what themes are there that these guys or girls are talking about that I feel like, like really resonate with me? And then it kicks into my passion, because wherever they go in that question, I'm going to be good. I'm good, because that's another thing. And I don't think a lot of people do it now, but I think when I first started podding, there's a lot of people who would just, not fake it, but almost pretend a little bit, like, yeah, I know that. It's okay to say you don't know everything. Not everybody knows everything, right? And I find that and I get lambasted for it. So I was on with Muggs, and he'd said something about a track that I knew the track, but I didn't actually know the title. So he said it, and I was like, oh, really? I don't know that track. And he was like, oh my God, you don't know that track? You need to hear that track. I got rinsed for not knowing that track. Clearly, I didn't know the song title, but in my mind, it was like, well, I'm not gonna edit that out. I'm not gonna. That I feel like there's more people who might just listen to it, and I feel you get a bit more attached to the person who's talking if they're just honest and who they are. And I would say the curation of it, it's only now turning the corner. I've been doing this 2 years now for the pod. I'm trying to do more, to keep it organic, like so to go in there and yes, have the ideas of what I want to say and how I want to say them as well, but not to keep it so strict, and to be a bit more like, no, just be loose, man. Just let's see where this goes. And I'm not very good at that. That's more the interviews, but in the debate shows we have and the reviews we have, and the we did a series on best 3 album runs. Those were so much more organic, because it's like me and you sitting here and going, right, why have Tribe Called Quest got the best 3 album run in 90s hip hop? Me and you don't need notes for that. We just need to listen to the albums. And to me, those were listens that I feel more comfortable listening back to, definitely, more than interviews. But I want to get there with the interviews where it's more, you have curated it to a point, but also just be ready to just go with it, man.
Yeah.
And if it's rubbish, you have the edit button. You have the edit button. And remember the power of that.
Well, I think, you know, there's, as a listener as well, there's definitely something when you listen to a podcast, there's an element of trust with the host, you know, and it's, do I trust this guy to be honest with me, as you mentioned, you know, and do I trust his opinion, and do I like where his intellect is, in the sense that does he ask the right questions, is it interesting, and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely think that that is the most important thing, and in order to do that, you have to be real, you have to let it go, you can't be too regimented. I think that's definitely, you know, because people do eventually listen because of the person. I think that's why Joe Rogan at the beginning got so big so quickly, because he was just himself. He didn't give a shit. He didn't care if he, you know, went against somebody's point of view, and he brought on some interesting guests. And I think, you know, whatever people think of it now, I think that's definitely one of the reasons.
So you know, on that then, you know what's interesting? That you just said that. I've listened to. Do you ever listen to Gawley and Rust?
No.
Podcast. So basically, it's Andrew Rust. Who do you remember the Netflix show Love? Did you ever watch that? It was a Netflix show called Love, and he's in it.
No, I don't think.
And the girl
from
it's just about two people who fall in love in LA, and the girl from Community. Yeah, the girl from Community is in it. But he did a podcast, right? And what you said is exactly right. People listen for you. So when I was listening to it, they do everything the Ringers Rewatchables has done. Jaws, all the horror films, and they're 3 hours long, right? This is the only time in a few years I've heard a 3-hour podcast. And I went in, and there's pauses, there's long bits of like them not remembering something, but there's so many moments in it where I was like, damn, Joe Rogan's style still lives, man. People are, there's a lot of highly produced podcasts now and narrative storytelling, which is really exciting. But for some reason, I'm attracted more to just two guys, if you, or whoever, two people, if you are like actually interesting and entertaining and making me laugh out loud, these two were, about Jaws, which I've heard every story there is to about Jaws. But for 3 hours, they're talking about Jaws. And I was like, damn, like, I listen just for them, I've realised. It's not even about Jaws. Do you know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. Absolutely nailed it, yeah.
You know, and what was the process when you were first starting the podcast? Obviously, your love for hip hop, you thought about turning it into a podcast and a business, essentially. You know, for young people or anybody who's got a passion and wants to turn it into a podcast, are there any pitfalls, or is there anything that they need to look out for, or what was it like in your experience?
Interested. You guys probably know, but podding is kind of evolving really quickly in my mind. It feels like I'm kind of stuck a little bit in like last year. I'm like, damn, there's VODs you can do now and video podcasts and stuff like that. So I might be a little bit, but I think there's some fundamental truths you have to do, which we've touched on, which is pitfall, be yourself, admit if you don't know anything, don't worry about it, it's fine. I would say if you start a pod, and it's really easy to just be like, yeah to this question, but I think really think about it. Are you really interested in this podcast or this series or this content or this topic? Because unless you're really, really loving it, you're not going to stay up till 2 a.m. at Gatwick Station waiting for a bus editing, because no one would. And I'm the only reason I'm doing that is because I love hip hop. And I'm sitting there and I was like, oh, what was I editing the other day? I was editing Corrupt came on the show with Razkaz, and they brought Crooked Eye on. 3 like massive rappers, and it's probably one of my favorite episodes. And it took such a long time to like really get done with the video and the editing. And I thought I would. At one point, I was just like, "Why the fuck am I doing this today? I should be like, you know, sleeping." But I was like, "No, I love it. I love this. I am honoured to be doing this and to actually make it successful. I never thought we'd be this successful." So that drove me. So I think that you need that drive to be real, like to be a real fundamental truth in yourself. Otherwise, you're probably not going to keep going. And then I would say it's an interesting one, because people talk about consistency, and I think that's absolutely true. You do need to be consistent, absolutely. But I think almost more than that, it's what you see as success is very different to what everyone else does. How do you measure your success? And it's something I've really tussled with. Do you look at other pods that are doing what you're doing and you think, oh, I can't do that, they've done that? Or do you, like Gawley and Rust, no, we're still going to do Jaws, just do it our way. Or we're still going to do The Chronic, we just do it our way. Or interviews is another one. A lot of these people are on press runs. So if Black Thought's doing a press run, I know he's on 10 other podcasts that are much bigger than mine. Yeah. But what he's not getting the intro I'm giving him. Yeah. And he's not getting me saying to him, are you eating chicken Szechuan right now? And talking about chicken Szechuan. Yeah, and I'm not saying these are gimmicky things. I'm just saying it's about being true to what you want to talk to this person about, right? Yeah. And so I think try to give your sense, like, don't let like success demoralize you or give you a false sense of security. You should really be in the middle of like, what mean, is it the numbers? Is it do the numbers mean something to you? Mm. Or is it more qualitative than that? Which is like, we don't have the biggest followings, but the people who do talk to us I respect them highly. They're either like people like yourself, there's people like who go out there and actually have put in the hours, even if they're not artists, they're journalists, writers, bloggers, other podcasters. That's another term of success. If anyone starts a podcast and keeps it going for year after year, that is a success to me. That is like, you have done so well to just keep this going. So again, it's about what you think is success. So I think another thing I used to get really hung up at was equipment. Was like, because I'm used to podding BBC, Guardian, and then I was at Bleacher Report, and they had a proper studio, amazing. Like, I remember we had Pavan from Foreign Beggars come in, and he came in and he was just like, these are the mics that Jay Diller used. I was like, what? Sorry? He was like, yeah, these are the mic that Jay Diller used. I was like, bloody hell, I am so lucky to be able to have access to this studio. So I think you need to have, I have actually switched off podcasts because of the quality at times, because you just can't hear them. So what are you gonna do? So I would say, like, you know, at least get enough rudimental, just YouTube how to pump up your production values. You'll get it done in half a day. You will. It's just getting the right formatted EQs, and that's it. And yeah, I think there's something to that as well. So yeah, sorry if that was a bit of a boring answer, but yeah, I do think that's part of it, man.
I think it's spot on. You know, I mean, getting back to the music side of things, do you collect vinyls?
Only just started this year, my man. Only just started, which makes me feel like a fraud because we called Crate 808. And I was like, fuck, man, I don't even collect vinyl. I need to start
I literally started this year too. A friend of mine, you know, just kind of got me into it. He's the same guy who put me on to science fiction. And once I heard that album, you know, I was straight on eBay buying Untrue, you know, all that kind of stuff. And finding new bands like Boards of Canada and people like that I'd never really heard before.
Ticking the boxes now, mate.
You know, honestly, but it really is that. It's ticking boxes of things like I never knew I would love. It's finding those gems, you know. And I mean, so as a fellow crate digger, right? Is there a track from the 90s, or doesn't have to be from the 90s, that not many people would know of, but that you know of, and that is a gem, so people can go and find?
Oh my God! Well, first of all, let's call this loose. This is a very loose. Absolutely. In terms of crate digging. I've had proper diggers on the pod, and they're like, oh my God, it's I'm kind of fascinated by their passion for it. But I would say, just an aside, actually, what I picked up the other day was Click Click by Wu-Tang in Derby. I live in Derby, and I found that on vinyl, just like on its own for like £2 or something. I was like, what? Really? It's my favorite Wu-Tang track as well. I was like, yeah, I'm getting that straight away. Yeah. So I know that's everyone knows that track, but Click Click Careful I just love that cut, man. But do you know one that I wish I had? It's okay, they have two, I suppose. But this year we've had a lot of West Coast artists on the pod, and I've just noticed we've had a lot of West Coast just vibes on the pod. Be it talking about Farside, we've had Dal the Funky Homo Sapien on, we've had Corrupt on, Raz Kaz, Crooked Eye, and we've got all these people on. It's like, oh wow, like I feel really West Coasty at the moment, and I really dived into hieroglyphics and Souls of Mischief, and more than probably any other year I've done. Really got into it, and I would say Taxi by those guys, which was on. I'm going to really expose myself here, man. But I think it might be on streaming on like a B-sides compilation. Okay. But that's one. Because their B-sides were killer. But another one is the original Batting Practice that Souls of Mischief did. Is one of the best hidden gem tracks of the 90s, bar none. Right. but
Okay.
I don't even know if that was issued on vinyl or anything. But I have heard it, and it's on and they talk about it on the Souls of Mischief documentary that's on YouTube. So go check that out. Even if you don't even if you don't know who they are, it's just fascinating to see how explosive hip hop was in like 93, 92. So I would say Batting Practice and Taxi by Souls of Mischief.
That's an excellent gem. I mean, you already named the band for my gem track.
Okay.
It was Running by Farside. You know, it was what album was on? Was it Lab Cab California?
Lab Cab in California, yeah.
And that was like, I mean, I feel like the album before that, I can't remember the name of it, but it had more of a comedic value, that first album. And the second one was kind of, you know, it was more reflective. And that track, man, I absolutely love it. I just
I love that too, man. I love it too. Jay Dilla at Farside. We had Slim Kid Trey from Farside on, and we talked about Running, and we talked about that album.
Yeah.
And you know why? When they were making that, they were fighting, like physically, fisticuffs in the studio, fighting with each other. Yeah, in the album, including Running. He even said Running wouldn't exist if he hadn't physically smacked someone in the face for it, because they didn't want it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's mad. And like, apparently Jay Dilla, bless him, the legend, was in the middle going, you know, don't fight. You're my favorite band. Don't fight. You're breaking my heart. And you're like, this is Jay Dilla doing that. It's amazing. But yeah, no, great shout. Great shout.
Absolutely. Listen, man, I think that's everything we've got time for. I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people haven't guessed yet or haven't been able to make sense of it, it's Kambi Thandi, executive producer of the Create 808 podcast. Do you have anything coming up or anything that you want to shout about?
Absolutely, man. If we could, we're finally, and I know listeners to the pod are probably just going to be, oh, here he goes again. But we are definitely releasing the Patreon. The Patreon is like one video away. So when this probably launches, it'll probably be live. But yeah, I feel like it's interesting as creatives and as yourself, like, you know, you're working in this pod world to make it feel sustainable, because love gets you far, absolutely, but we all get older, we all have more kids, we all have changes in our lifestyles. So we dove into Patreon, mate, and it was, I feel like I'm going to really enjoy it. So that is going to be live at patreon.com/crate808, crate808. And yeah, and there we're going to be doing, well, you know, we're talking about like loose, keeping it loose and keeping it like kind of vibrant. And we're going to do some live shows, like just live Zoom. So whoever's a Patreon, we all jump on once a month and just chat about hip hop for like 40 minutes. We call it the 808 Chamber, because that's the kind of tenuous guy I am. I like to just use these awful ways I can get into these just puns and whatever. So 808 Chamber, I'm looking forward to that. And then we're doing 2 different series that kind of, you get, if you're top tier, you'll get 2 extra episodes a month. And they're diving into Jay Dilla and MF Doom, and we're reviewing every single Wu-Tang solo album, and we're starting with Ghostface. So yeah, we're going to do every Ghostface album with a different guest, and just dive in for like an hour and talk about his albums that mean a lot to us. So yeah, man, the Patreon, I would say I big that up, man. It's coming soon.
Awesome, man. Well, guys, ladies and gentlemen, definitely go check out the Patreon. Thank you so much for coming on, and
thank you, man.
We'll chat in the future, man. Good luck with everything.
You too, man. Big up. Thank you.